Hello. I want to discuss with you today misinformation, government cover-ups, and a brave and dedicated fellow, so far as I can tell, called Farthing. Actually, his real name is Paul Farthing. He's an ex-British Marine who, seeing the scale of suffering, deprivation of all sorts of animals, dogs, cats, donkeys, and so on in Afghanistan, he started an animal rescue um, place. I suppose he went into that when his tour of duty had finished. I actually did try to reach out to him to have a chat, but he didn't get back to me. I'm not blaming him. He's probably got a fair amount to do now. Primarily, that would be his efforts to get the staff out. So I'll start with what the media here in the UK have to say. And their attitude has been nothing short of disgraceful. There's been a lot of opinion in which a bunch of comfortable middle-class inkies have accused Farthing of putting animals ahead of people. But even more shocking, well, I hardly know how to put this. Now, you mustn't be shocked. So, when Farthing was leaving a message for Peter Quentin, whom The Guardian describes as a special advisor to the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, I have to explain, he was getting a flight out of Afghanistan, not an army flight. He wasn't asking the British government for help. A concerned and very generous American businessman was sending a plane at his own expense to haul Farthing and his staff out of there and the smaller animals. And Farthing realised Quentin was being obstructive. Well, apparently, when he left a message for Mr. Quentin, Mr. Farthing used... Now, sit down. Are you sitting comfortably? Mr. Farthing used strong language. Can you imagine? He's stuck in Afghanistan in a war zone with a lot of animals he's trying to save, and the visas aren't coming through, and Mr. Farthing used strong language. Well, this is what he said. Oh, yeah, I'll redact it to save your blushes and YouTubes. He said, "I just found out that it is you blocking me getting this flight out of Afghanistan for my staff and the animals. So here's the deal, buddy. You either get me that ISAF number, whatever an ISAF number is, and you get me permission to get onto that airfield, or tomorrow morning I'm going to turn on you and the whole country and everybody else who's invested in this rescue is going to know it's you blocking this move. All right?" Now, can you think of anything more terrible for a man to say? The press was suitably horrified. You know, it very much reminds me of the froth into which the American press whipped itself up about Trump ordering 2 scoops of ice cream. Well, since then, reams of vitriolic newsprint have been churned out with the press screaming about Farthing putting animals before people, calling him selfish, dictatorial, unconcerned about humanity, and of course, being loud-mouthed. In any other situation, the British press would be all over themselves, praising a man rescuing animals. I couldn't understand what had happened in this case, and so here is my guesswork. My guess is that the newspapers had got an instruction from the government, or perhaps Quentin directly, in the hope that if they whip up this story enough, there would be enough resentment and fury which would be pointing in the wrong direction. so that people wouldn't notice the mess that the government themselves had made of the evacuation. Now, look, I do acknowledge that they didn't have much wriggle room. The behaviour of the American command was so capricious, it wasn't possible to plan properly, I know that. But even so, they were incredibly sluggish in their reactions. Not the soldiers, the government. And since the only way the papers could have got hold of that leaked recording would have been if Mr. Quentin himself had handed it to them. And I suspect, along with a direction to put the worst possible spin on it. I would therefore have to suspect that Quentin, or perhaps the government, is trying to hide something. I can't say for sure what, but all I can think of at the moment is that some huge mistake or inefficiency has happened that hasn't come out yet, and they're using Farthing to hide behind. Anyway, this is Mr. Farthing's rebuttal of their accusations, which is published in mailplus.co.uk, and here's a picture of Mr. Farthing. And this is what he says. The Taliban stopped my staff getting out. We had no military help and have never spoken to the PM's wife. At no time did I put animals before people, he says. We arranged for a privately funded commercial aircraft. We were not taking space on any military aircraft. We did not ask for or were given any military resources. Sadly, I didn't get my staff out because the Taliban prevented that. But it wasn't just the Taliban, you see. I'm going to add here that he'd been begging for exit visas for weeks, and the Foreign Office had been dragging their feet. If they just moved themselves a few days earlier, those people would have got out. Anyway, to continue. And while we were on the runway at Kabul airport, we were the last flight to leave. The British troops had already left. There was no one to bring with us on our plane because Britain had evacuated everyone they could have. And then next, sadly, in the end, my staff were turned away at gunpoint. I had an AK-47 put in my face and was told my staff were not going to be able to leave Afghanistan. I sat down on my hands and knees and pleaded with this Taliban commander to let my staff through, but all he did was push back harder. What a surprise. And it was just a matter of a couple of days if the Foreign Office or whoever was in charge had just got those visas out quicker. I'm not just praying for my staff, I'm praying for the ordinary Afghan people. The country was heading in the right direction before this happened. Kabul was a thriving city of people who actually wanted to help, to be part of the solution to a better Afghanistan. And I've said this before, I mean, he is actually confirming what I had already surmised from what else I'd seen. I received so many angry emails from a lot of people, even friends, based on hearsay and not facts. Some saying, I can't believe you put donkeys on a flight instead of people. I didn't take donkeys out of the country. I've no idea where this kind of information came from. Well, obviously, it didn't come. I mean, people don't imagine you put donkeys on. Somebody must have told them that. Somebody must have been putting this worm round, mustn't they? There you have it, misinformation all the way along. So why do you think this is happening? Oh, well, anyway, here's some more. I also want to make this crystal clear. I've never, ever had any form of contact with the Prime Minister's wife or with 10 Downing Street. I haven't heard that, but there you are, more misinformation. So that's the story. And that's how I feel there's something funny going on. Of course, I'm not in a position to know what it is or what it was, but I certainly can see evidence of huge inefficiency here in whatever department Quentin was in charge of. And I just wanted to set the record straight on the Farthing thing, that's all. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.